What's up everyone, Michael here with the news of the week. We're going to be going over some news and such like we did just last week and the week before that. I kind of like doing this thing, so we're going to keep doing it, and hopefully I'm going to be changing it up every single week because I'm just trying things out. So we're doing things a little bit differently today. I'm going to try and do it a little bit more straightforward, etc, etc. Anyways, all these news articles came from the Broken Chat Box Discord, link in the description. Basically, we have a news and such section, so everything that's posted in there I will do over in these videos unless I find the article to just be relevant to talk about in a video. But anyways, we're going to start off with some, immediate stuff, then we're going to talk about some not so immediate stuff, then we're going to talk about stuff I really want to talk about, and then we're just going to kind of taper off from there. So let's go ahead and begin. Now, if you're watching this video on release, basically Jelopy is free on the Humble Bundle. You can end up picking it up for the next 24 hours from this video's launch, or a little bit over 24 hours from this video's launch, and you should be able to pick it up. Now, keep in mind, this is free on Humble Bundle. If you want a Steam key through a Humble Bundle through this offer, it's going to be $1 to get the Steam key, because I know some people just want all their games on Steam, but basically you can download the DRM free version from Humble Bundle through this for completely free. So go ahead and just pick it up if you want it. Another thing that's kind of free, I think it's still free, I'm not 100% sure, it still says free for a limited time on here, but basically on Origin you can get The Sims 4, the base game, for free for a limited time. I don't know how long the offer lasts. It doesn't actually say on here, but you just go click it and it'll add it to your library, so you'll be able to play The Sims 4 if you really wanted to without the expansions, which is basically like a 16th of a game. So if you want to, you can, but I guess if you were looking forward to getting the expansions in the future, this will make it cheaper. Ow. And as for sales, obviously we have the other sales that are still going on. We have the Steam Summer Sale is supposed to start up in the next week or so. So look forward to that. And also Humble Bundle has a new Tiny Build bundle in its offering. So basically you can end up getting the bundle. It includes Graveyard Keeper, which I guess they're using as like their big selling point. Personally, I don't really find any of these games worth the prices, but some people might enjoy them. They're just not my thing. Most of them are kind of little grindy number grinders, and I'm not a big fan of that. But Cluster Truck is on there, and that's really fun, so I guess I recommend it for that one. So go ahead and check that one out. Remember, links to all this stuff in the description, or if you're on my website, it should be underneath the video if it's posted on my website. We'll see if that happens. Now, first off, the first big thing that I actually want to talk about that I'm really, really, really excited for is the GOG Galaxy 2.0. So GOG announced that they're releasing a new Galaxy client, which if you don't know what GOG Galaxy is, basically it's their launcher / client thing, which is fairly open. GOG sells all their stuff and it's all DRM free and stuff. So basically it's just an easier way to download and install games, and it keeps track of stuff like how long you've been online and has a friends list system and stuff. And you can obviously access their storefront from there. And this is pretty cool. Like, I actually like the Galaxy client. Actually, can you access the store from it? I don't think I've ever used the store from it. I always use it through the website, so I don't actually know if that's true or not. Anyways, they're releasing a big 2.0 update, but this just isn't an update to the existing client. This is an entirely new client. I'll go ahead and scroll through the preview page they have up here, but the offerings here are really freaking cool because they advertise at the top, all of your games and friends in one place. This is what I have been calling for freaking ever. So Steam has been trying to do this over and over again for quite a long time now, and people always bring up the thing of Steam is like, oh, well, you can add other games to Steam, but you have to do them individually, and it doesn't really work very well, and integrating your friends list systems has not been a thing that's ever happened. Steam has talked about doing it before, but it hasn't, and Discord's talked about doing it before, but they haven't done it. So whether or not this is actually going to achieve that, I don't know, but the offerings here when it comes down to games is absolutely fantastic. So what they're saying is that on launch, basically you're going to be able to have one library for all of your games, including PC, including console, including whatever else you want to put onto it. And they're actually opening up their API, sorry, I just woke up a few minutes ago. They're opening up their APIs to the community so people can actually make their own integration. So basically what it's going to be doing is it's going to be like, okay, well, we're going to integrate, like, let's say your Steam library or Epic Games library or your Humble Bundle library. And it'll be like, okay, well, cool. We'll add those to your library and it'll have shortcuts to all those links. Even if the game isn't installed, it'll be like, hey, here it is. You have it. And so you can go through and just look at all of your games, like literally all of them. You can add your own from your own libraries as well. So I have some local stuff that I had discs for, such as Sonic Riders, for example. I have that on disc. That's not on a digital platform. So if I want to use it, I have to go to my, you know how computers work. Basically, you just go to your like little start menu or whatever, wherever your shortcut is, and click on it. This will be able to actually integrate all of those, including API ones from the community. And so they have this big API thing that they're going to release the documentation for, and then people can make their own integrations for things like, let's say, Indiegogo or itch.io, if they don't have official integration for it, and be like, okay, cool, well, now you can add in all these other games. And so you can have one launcher that just shows all of your games, and you can click on it and it will just launch the game, which sounds incredible. And that's something I've been wanting for so freaking long. And I know there's been some open source kind of modifications that you can make and have kind of done that, but they always require a bunch of little hacky things, or they require you to add games individually. The original GOG client as well, the GOG Galaxy client 1.0, actually allowed you to add games from pretty much anything and allowed you to do all the shortcut stuff, but you had to do them individually or in batches. And for someone that has over 500 games on all these different platforms, it's complicated and just not worth the effort. I'd rather just have to try to remember. And I honestly forget sometimes that I have certain games on certain platforms because I'm like, oh yeah, I have that game, don't I? And then I go play it, like Bejeweled on Origin. I never launch Origin, so like I forget that I have it, but I enjoy playing that every once in a while. Whenever I'm rendering, I can just throw it up and actually play it for quite a while. So I'm super excited for this because it's supposed to be a single launcher. Now they do say on here, install and launch any PC game you own, no matter the platform. The installing part, I'm not 100% sure on. I am a little skeptical on how they're going to get that to work for non-official. I'm sure there's ways that people can make it work, but I think there's going to be certain platforms that it just won't work for. But I'm pretty sure it'll work with Steam and Epic Games because they've been willing, and they actually have like a large API themselves to where you can actually use that type of stuff to install games from those platforms. So we know that the major ones are going to be included, which is super exciting. Now, the two things that they say coming soon is the games discovery thing, where basically they're going to have news, popular games, and you can actually integrate your friends list is another thing that they said is going to come on soon. Now, we haven't seen any other platforms successfully do the whole cross-platform friends things. And that I'm not necessarily 100% like against or for or whatever. I think that that's going to be a complication. I don't think it's going to work as well as some people were speculating. But if it does work well, that's actually really, really cool. The idea of merging your friends list between something like Steam, Origin, Uplay, what else do I have? I make a friends list, or League of Legends, I don't know. Like having all of those types of friends lists on one place. One thing that I really, really would need from that, however, is that I have a lot of friends that have friend accounts on each of those platforms. I would want a way to group those all into one friend. Now, I seem like that's a no-brainer, and that's going to be duh. Like, of course you would have that, so why wouldn't you have that? We need that. We need that 100% because otherwise I'm going to have 7 copies of the same friend on every single platform, and that's going to be a little bit too much and a little bit annoying. But if we can actually get that sort of linking system, sort of like Discord has, to where you can actually just make it so that it has all of your accounts under your one name, and then people can actually link it through that. So like if you're on Xbox or whatever, you can search for somebody by their Xbox tag, and they'll just find your Discord name. That's the best integration I've seen so far. If we can get that, but a little bit better, and a little bit more integrated automatically with other platforms, that would be great. If there was no manual like input required, that would be absolutely fantastic. Otherwise, everything seems really cool. The GOG client, the original one, is actually my favorite digital client. The only problem with it is the fact that I don't have all that much on GOG. And since I play a lot of Japanese releases, they have been notorious when it comes down to updating games on GOG. So I basically had to buy them through Steam. And most of those games don't even launch on GOG because GOG is DRM free and it's a little bit more complicated and it has a bigger peer process. And so they just release it on Steam because that's easy and they know it works and they do that. So everything's just kind of exclusive to Steam. So I'm kind of stuck with Steam. But if I can use the GOG Galaxy client and just ignore Steam altogether because Steam's client is just ass to use, I would freaking love it. So I'm actually legitimately excited for this GOG client update, which sounds strange. I know I'm probably in the minority here. I know a lot of people like Steam and they like using whatever the hell they want. But I'm one of those people who's even used Discord to launch my games before because I'm just like, oh yeah, there's a games tab here, and I'm just too lazy to go over and like find whatever hell I want. I can just go to Discord. Discord remembers all the games that I have launched through Origin. I never have Origin up. It's all the way buried in my shortcuts, so I'm like, screw it. And I just click on Discord and click on Bejeweled, and it starts up for me. Done. I want that except for everything. It'd be so freaking great. Also, GOG has a great way of like keeping your privacy, and they don't keep like a lot of personal information, and they allow you to sync between devices and stuff, which is supposedly going to carry over with this version. Now, you can sign up for the beta right now. It's not out yet, but you can sign up for the beta. Apparently, it's a first come, first serve basis, so I will be doing a video immediately on it once I get into the beta, if I possibly can, unless they have like a restriction or something like that, like an NDA. I doubt they do, but basically, I want to see how this works immediately, like as soon as I can, because I'm really, really excited for it, and I hope it works, and I want to see how the friend integration works in the future, because seriously, I just want a universal launcher that works well, and GOG Galaxy, the original launcher, is absolutely fantastic. So if they make that but better, it's going to be even more fantastic. So yeah, sorry, I rambled on a little bit about that one, but super excited. That was enough content to fill an entire video by itself. Yeah, also support stuff like GOG and other platforms as well, not just Steam and not just Epic Games. Make sure you're supporting everyone, and that will, in the future, if we have these types of universal launches, if GOG isn't the only one, of course, if there's other people that would actually do this. Like I said, there's been open source integrations before that have attempted to do this sort of thing. If we do that, people will no longer have to complain about like, oh, well, I don't want to download the Epic Games launcher to play this game that's exclusive to that platform. They can just be like, cool, I'll just launch it on GOG Galaxy, whatever, don't care. And then we can support developers no matter what the hell's going on, and Epic Games wouldn't get such a big leverage by having these exclusive games. So, yeah, because I've talked in the past about how these exclusive games have been important for Epic Games to actually survive. But if something like this existed, that wouldn't have had to happen. So there you go. So hopefully this goes well. God, I'm so excited for it. It's so dumb. Carrying on about GOG, however, this isn't actually specific to GOG because it's already happened to Steam, but basically the remaining Telltale games are going to be removed from GOG next week. So basically Telltale Games has been sort of falling apart in the legal aspects of things because basically all their licensing are expired because Telltale Games is no more. They liquidated and closed down and they're gone, essentially. So all those licenses that they made with different companies such as Steam or GOG and other distributors have kind of fallen apart. And this means that basically games are disappearing from places. Now, certain platforms such as consoles obviously have the physical copies and things that we're going to still be around. And I guess some of the digital contracts are lasting longer than others, and GOG's has lasted longer than Steam's. But basically next week it was confirmed that they're going to basically be disappearing. Now, there are going to be certain ones that come back that are owned by different copyright owners, such as 2K Games is confirmed with Eurogamer that is going to be working to get the Tales of the Borderlands back on sale as soon as possible. So basically like, hey, we want to make sure that our Borderlands game is, available to purchase because they want that to be there. Now, the good news is that if you buy these on any of those platforms, you can still download it afterwards. So it's not like the game just completely disappears from you, but you won't be able to purchase it anymore, which is a little bit annoying, which means that the amount of platforms that you can buy it on is going to get slimmer and slimmer as this goes on. Now, the hopes are that people end up kind of picking up the rights to all these types of things, or that the original copyright owners, such as like the ones for the Batman series or the ones for the Wolf Among Us series, they would just like pick it up and then be able to put it back on sale. And most of that's going to be like a corporate pickup sort of thing, be like, oh yeah, we can make some money off of this, sure, when they just buy the copyright or they just pick it up somehow. I don't know exactly their whole situation. I don't know how all their licensing worked. But hopefully people end up picking that up so they can go back up. Because say as much as you want about Telltale Games and how terrible they did at managing their company, their games are well regarded. And there's a lot of people that really, really enjoyed their games. And I think that having games just disappear is a huge disappointment to the digital era. Because for as easy as it is to get games, it's also just as easy for them to completely disappear. And this also pushes people towards piracy of like, hey, we're no longer supporting people that end up keeping these games up. Now, at this point, when these games go down and the company no longer exists, all you're supporting is the rights holders, and none of this sort of stuff is going towards like royalties and things. I think some of it is like that's why all these licensing are expired. But after that license expires, unless somebody else picks it up, then nobody's getting any money for them. So yeah, it's a little yikes. And so some people just might end up pirating it now because if they want it but they can't buy it, then that's what they do. So yeah, it just makes it complicated to get these games, and I think that being able to buy games easily is the best option for literally everyone involved. So hopefully they end up coming back up eventually. Now, we've seen this happen before, but this is a nice or interesting case. Not really a nice case. This is a terrible case, but an interesting case because Telltale Games itself actually closed down, and because they worked with almost exclusively licensed deals, all these licensed deals are falling apart and no longer exist. So yikes. I don't know. That's a weird story. I've talked about Telltale Games closing down before, so I have a video on that. But yeah, I'll link it in the description as well if I can end up finding it. So I already spieled about that for quite a long time. Now, carrying on about storefronts and losing things, Epic's first big sale had a bunch of issues. I think most of them are resolved now, but this is actually just kind of like a quick overview of those types of things. Now, last week, I did the video in the morning, and it was like right as soon as the store had launched its big sale and everything, and I was like, okay, cool, like this sounds like a really good idea. And that was assuming that Epic Games knew how to run a storefront. Apparently not. I mean, I should have assumed they didn't. But oh my god, they screwed it up so bad. So their sale was to give $10 off of absolutely everything on the storefront and basically give a universal discount. as well as having a bunch of games on sale. Now, I think that people were in charge of what games were on sale. So like if they wanted their game to be 75% off or whatever, they would determine that. And so most developers knew that the storefront was going on sale or having a big sale. However, not every developer was notified about the extra $10. And this ran into some complications because not only did some developers just want to be, not wanting to be on sale, because there's a whole situation to where basically if you end up having a game on sale for too early, then people devalue the game. Now, I think that's not a problem with the storefront itself. I don't think that's a problem with sales. I don't think that's a problem with developers. I think that's a problem with the mindset that consumers have in the current gaming market, and that's mostly pushed by things like AAA companies kind of going in and being like, you can get this game 10% off or whatever, and that has sort of sullied that whole idea of buying games at full price isn't worth it sort of mindset. And if a game's ever been on sale, then it's like, oh, well, now I can't buy it for full sale. I'll have to buy it on sale. I think that that's sort of where that comes from. So I don't really think that's, like, it is valid, but I don't think we should be using that as an excuse for all this. But what they ended up doing is, because it was doing stuff like that, they ended up removing games from the storefront itself. So things like the Borderlands 3 or the Masquerade Bloodlines, or Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, or whatever, which isn't even out yet because this $10 actually accounted for pre-orders as well, which I thought was really, really cool. I thought that was a really cool idea. Apparently they weren't notified, and because it was going to devalue the game too early, they said, they basically removed it from the storefront. And when it came down to larger publishers, they were removing their games because it comes, like from Paradox Games, for example, they were removing all their games because it goes against contracts they have with other platform holders. Now, again, these types of things are problems with external factors, such as these third-party contracts that are like, oh, well, we'll have price parity until launch or whatever. That sort of contract is predatory and just not good to do at all inside the industry anywhere. I think that having competitive pricing is probably a good thing if you want a certain platform to succeed. But again, they have these types of contracts like Steam, for example. If you have a product on sale on another platform, you have to price message on Steam. And that is part of their thing. And indie developers have gotten in trouble for that in the past and had their games removed from Steam. This happened a few years ago. You can actually look up one indie visual novel that ended up getting removed from Steam because it did this with, I forgot the other storefront. I want to say Indiegogo, but I'm not 100% sure. But they did their own sale or whatever, and they ended up getting removed from Steam for it. And I think they got added back, but I don't remember. This was quite a few years ago. But again, that is part of the Steam contract, which means that you have to have price parity. And while certain larger companies can get away with this type of stuff, somebody like Paradox doesn't want to risk that sort of thing. They don't want to be like, okay, well, we're going to go against all our console manufacturing, licenses and stuff like that. So the only way, apparently, to get out of this was to remove their game temporarily from the platform. Now, they did say that everyone who already bought it would still get their game, and they would end up bringing it back on the store once the sale's over, but this was not a small case, as in tons and tons of games were being removed from the storefront. And anybody who bought it before the discount, or before it disappeared as the discount, then they still get the discount or whatever, so it's not like they're going to get their money back and be like, oh, now you got to buy it for $10 more or whatever. But this was just a huge case of Epic not communicating properly with its developers, which is super disappointing. But also, I think that all these things were sort of kind of external factors. Like, these are all things that I don't think Epic Games was necessarily aware of or necessarily thinking about when they did this. The store sale was already pretty dang rushed. Like, it was super, super rushed, and I'm definitely not going to praise them for how rushed it is. However, the concept itself is pretty cool. Having a $10 discount that Epic Games would actually just give to the developer straight up is pretty nice. And some people brought that up. They're like, oh, well, the $10 is still going to the developers, but it was a little bit short-sighted because it didn't look at all the external factors and the possibility of external contracts affecting that. And there's a lot of little complicated things I won't get into here. I might do a future video if people are interested in it, but it's just a really huge complicated mess that I don't think Epic handled properly. And when the leak came out that there was going to be a sale, they literally the next day released the sale, and I think that was to actually catch people and be like, hey, by the way, no, we got a sale right here, right now. It's out there. Go check it out. Instead of, people looking at the leak and be like, oh man, how's this leak? Oh my God, what's going to be true? And people speculating, because the hate for the Epic Game Store has been massive over the last months, like just several months. And so basically they wanted to capitalize on that whole, oh my God, they're going to have a sale. And then they're like, yeah, it's out now. And then have people rush to it. Now, on top of this, there was another thing that came onto light. Now, this happens on literally every single gaming platform that I can think of. I literally found articles from Steam from like 7 years ago. I found articles for Origin about 5 years ago, and articles for Uplay from last year, to where basically people would buy a mass number of games at once, and then they would get their credit card, or their credit card would be like, is this fraudulent? And then it would cancel the transaction or put it on hold or whatever, and then they would get their account banned on whatever storefront it was. Now, this was happening in bulk on the Epic Game Store because, for one, the Epic Game Store doesn't have a storefront, or a store, or it has a storefront, but it doesn't have a shopping cart. So you can't like just buy all the games at once as one singular purchase, which is going to flag things like your credit card, because it's gonna be like, you're making multiple purchases from this place you'd never purchased for. That's gonna be questionable. And then you also have the added fact that it's also the Epic Game Store, which has never had a big sale like this, and that means that nobody has really gone in and bought things from them before. Like, I know that some people have gone in and bought some games, but you might like buy 1 or 2 games, but then this fraudulent charges thing would be like looking at it and be like, oh, well, this is abnormal because you've bought only 1 or 2 things, but now you're buying like 20 things all of a sudden. And that sort of, there's no pattern to decide for there, because it hasn't been there long enough for you to be like, oh, well, you buy a game here occasionally, maybe you're just buying a bunch of them or whatever. And so this has been triggering a lot of credit cards and a lot of debit cards or whatever, and all this sort of fraudulent detection stuff on both ends, on both Epic's end and user ends. And it just ended up being a disaster to where people were getting their accounts locked. And for anyone that's had to deal with Epic Game support, it isn't great. It's a little bit slow. It used to be better. Before Fortnite exploded, it was actually pretty great. The support team was actually really responsive and really helpful. I'm somebody who's been working in Unreal Engine 4 for several years, and so I've had to deal with them a few times. But now that Fortnite exploded, basically they're overwhelmed with support tickets, and this probably didn't help. And it's been taking people a while to get their accounts back, and that locks them out of their games, which is just super, super unfortunate. Again, this has happened with every single digital storefront I can think of, except for GOG. I didn't find an article talking about it with GOG, but for everything else I have. So most of it comes down to just credit cards and, you know, your digital banks or whatever having issues with you buying a bulk of items from a place you've never bought from before. I think the idea of the storefront not having a shopping cart to buy everything in bulk at once has probably escalated the issue even worse than it should. Epic Games Store should have a shopping cart. That is just a no-brainer. Why it still doesn't have one, I don't know. It's on their so-called roadmap, which is a little bit ridiculous. It should have one already, and I always forget that it doesn't have one. Now, I don't buy games in bulk. I normally buy 1 or 2 games at once, and so I'm not one of those people that will do something like this. But again, like, it's just dumb. Like, this entire issue is just dumb because Epic Games Store is just screwing up at being an Epic Game Store. Quite frankly, it's not an Epic Game Store. It's just a store, and they're not doing it quite well. That said, I still support Epic Games in the fact that they're trying to mix up the market, but if they keep being hastefully like this and not being prepared, and especially if they're responding to things like a leak of a sale coming up and then just releasing the sale before they were obviously prepared, then they're going to run into a lot of hardship in the future, and it could jeopardize the idea of competition in the marketplace. I was just talking about GOG Galaxy 2.0, which could change this entire marketplace. It could make it so that Epic Games no longer has to be this competitive, and yet they're screwing it up, and they may actually end up killing themselves off in the process, which would be devastating for quite a lot of reasons, actually. And I won't cover it in this video because I've talked about it in the past, but long story short, Steam needs competition, and Epic Games is that only competition at the moment. And while I wish it was somebody like GOG or some other open source platform such as Discord or another storefront, it's going to be Epic Games because Epic Games has the money and the desire to do so. And so that's really where we're looking right now. And so if Epic Games keeps screwing up like this, it's going to turn people like me that are in support, and they're going to turn me against them, because if they keep screwing up, it shows incompetence, and it means that we can't trust them as a storefront. Personally, I haven't had any issues with the Epic storefront, so I'm not really there to complain too much about my experience, but if other people aren't having a good experience, then developers aren't going to release on the platform, obviously. Anyways, moving on to some more depressing news. Hold on one second. I need to get a drink of water. There we go. Delicious. I just woke up before I started recording this. I already did the scripting yesterday and everything, so now I'm just like, oh my god, I gotta talk and everything, and my throat's like, you shouldn't be doing this. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. Anyways, Unity pulls tweet from blog post as gambling support is called unethical. So, Unity 3D. All right, so Unity 3D is an engine. It's a game engine. It's used pretty much everywhere now. It's been called one of the two big major hitters when it comes down to engines in the indie marketplace and the kind of smaller games marketplace. And the other one being Unreal Engine 4. Now, the difference between Unreal Engine 4 and Unity is the fact that Unity 3D is used in the gambling industry a ton, because Unity has not only like a web launcher and stuff like that, but it can also run on other platforms such as mobile. It can run on specialized devices. You can program it to do so, and it doesn't have these sort of lockdown restrictions that Unreal Engine 4 does when it comes down to platform support. So you can actually program in your own platform support. So let's say you have a casino machine and you want your own sort of, chipset and everything. You can program Unity to use that specific chipset and work with whatever OS you want it to, which is mostly going to be Linux in this case, I assume. And so basically Unity 3D has picked up a big audience within the gambling industry. Now, they obviously know this because they charge for their engine and they charge licensing fees. And so basically they actually know this because they take a lot of money from the gambling industry. And they actually made a tweet that came out about this sort of thing. So basically they were saying, we recently delivered our first release of the year, Unity 2019.1, which includes 300 features with a weird face emoji, many of which are essentially helpful for developers in the gambling industry. And they actually had a blog post that accompanied this. I don't have a link to the blog post. I'm sure there's an image here in the article that I'll link below. It's from Eurogamer. They also have a link to this tweet, which I would have shown up while I was reading it. But basically, the whole idea was that, hey, they're like, hey guys, we released some stuff from gambling, and basically saying like, hey, use our game or use our engine for gambling. It's great because we have all these features. Developers immediately called them out on it, and they're like, hey, gambling mechanics in games are literally destroying games as just anything. And we've actually had a lot of experienced developers and a lot of indie developers giving a huge backlash to this sort of thing and be like, hey, Unity, you shouldn't be supporting the sort of gambling industry. And while some people were like, oh, well, that's part of their market, they're just doing their job, there's also a sort of saving face grace here, as in Unity noticed this huge backlash and they removed the tweets and blogs within 24 hours. They were like, okay, cool, we can't do that because that's uncool. But that also shows that these platforms and these engines are just perfectly fine with capitalizing on the fact of just people just gambling their life savings away. Now, I've talked about loot boxes and gambling mechanics in games before in the past, so I won't shred on it here, but basically it's not good. It's manipulative and it takes advantage of people, and it just is not a good thing in general. And it's a huge thing that's been going on in the game industry lately over the last year and a half or so, and it's been just destroying games. And on the mobile platform, it's been destroying games for years and years, and it's one of the reasons why the mobile game market has such a terrible reputation right now, and Unity is in no small part of that. Like, Unity is huge on mobile, and the reason why is because it's so easy to use and so easy to platform or use on all these different platforms. And so when they end up going into it, it's like, oh yeah, it's easy to just make a gambling game on mobile and then take advantage of some kid or some gullible adult and just take advantage of gambling addictions and make a ton of money from it. And it's unfortunate. It really, really is unfortunate. And it's even more unfortunate to see Unity as a company embrace that sort of thing and encourage it with something like this. Because the blog post, I remember I did read it when it was out. I was reading it and I was like, why would they be talking about it? Because they're talking about it as if it's like praiseworthy and if it's great. And it was like monetization for the future. And no. And so many developers have just been like, we're never using Unity because of this. Like, we are literally not going to support a company that is going to openly talk about stuff like this because it's literally against video games. Like, it is a game engine company saying, hey, ruin your video games. And that's just, for anybody that has any passion about this industry at all, they hate that. They just do not want to see it whatsoever. And they're like, no, we will not tolerate that. And so a lot of people are actually switching their games from Unity into Unreal Engine 4 because of this, which is funny because Epic Games has its own list of issues we've talked about before on this channel. But again, it's just, they don't want to use Unity because they are openly supporting something like this. And at least Epic Games has been sort of against it or whatever, and they've been sort of siding along, just kind of saying nothing about it. Whether they support it or not, we don't know, but they're also not a big part of the gambling industry. But Unity is, and they've been embracing it for years, and it's kind of cool to see it blow up in their face finally, because it's been one of my calling points of like, why not to use Unity, and their business practices and what they embrace just hasn't been a good image for them for quite a while now. Going into more unfortunate news, God, this is just a great week for unfortunate news. Ouya's game store closes for good next month. I'm sure somebody cared. I'm sure there's one person in the audience at some point in the future that was like, oh yeah, I remember the Ouya. But the Ouya was an Android-based device, basically had its own storefront and stuff, and they're like, it's going to be Android gaming, and it's like a little console thing. It failed. Just obliterated itself, just completely failed. Nobody really bought it. I mean, it had pre-orders and stuff like that, so obviously people had it. Now, the good news is that if you have games installed on it, it'll still work. It's not like an always online DRM or anything like that, but they did say that as some purchase validations upon launch will not work after it's launched, and the storefront will be down. You will not be able to download games afterwards. So if you have a Ouya, if you're one of the 6 people in the world that have an Ouya, then download all the games you want on it now, because after the storefront's gone, it won't be able to download new games. Now, I don't know how the Ouya works. If it has like a USB or something like that, you still might be able to get games through external services, you know, aka privacy and things, you know, unofficial download sources, I'll call it. And so maybe you can still use your Ouya for something. I know people have been modding their Ouyas as well to do other things and run Linux and things. And so it's not like it's a completely useless device, but basically I'm surprised that Ouya's storefront was still running, quite frankly. So apparently, Razer now owns Ouya, and they're kind of bringing that sort of thing into it. And so basically, Razer might be shutting it down. They might start something up for it, or they might do something in the future for it, but I seriously doubt. I just seriously doubt it. But Ouya, it was a huge Kickstarter success that came into a failure of a product. And quite frankly, the storefront's going down. So if you have an Ouya and you want games on it, download all the games that you want on it now, and then you'll just have to hope that it doesn't require any sort of DRM or anything after the store shuts down, which is a little bit unfortunate. You could technically test it. You could download it or whatever. Anyways, I'm not recommending to buy games on Ouya, no. But if you have games on Ouya, make sure they're all downloaded onto your console. That way, if they are playable after the store is down, you can still play them. I should have said that first. Anyways, more depressing news, this time including Nintendo. Now, one fun little thing that I did learn is that apparently the Nintendo kart racer that's releasing on mobile, Mario Kart Tour, I think, is apparently a microtransaction-filled hell. So don't look forward to that game. There's been little tiny reviews coming out about their closed beta and stuff like that. It could change until launch, but basically be careful of that. Nintendo has a history of sort of embracing the idea of loot boxes and pay to win. And this is even more exemplary with this next article. Nintendo to shut down Animal Crossing, Fire Emblem mobile games in Belgium over loot box law fears. So more games are actually being shut down than just those two. That's just what the headline includes. But basically any Nintendo game that includes loot boxes or any of those sort of pay to win randomized elements is being removed from the storefront in Belgium. Now, this is something I said was going to happen forever ago. I said this was going to happen over a year ago, to when people were talking about regulation over loot boxes. I was like, hey, certain countries are going to end up, or certain areas are going to end up banning these loot boxes, and all they're going to do is remove it from the storefronts or remove it from those regions and make it so you can't download them or you can't make purchases. That's exactly what Nintendo's doing. So basically, in light of all these loot box laws, Nintendo is announcing that basically these games will no longer be able to be downloaded or played or purchasing anything inside of those games in Belgium. And so essentially, basically all these games are just removed from people in Belgium. So if you're in Belgium and you still want to play these games for whatever reason, they're not very good, then you can actually download them through other apps and VPNs and things like that. But basically, they're going to be blocking you from playing the game if you're on a Belgium IP, most likely. So basically, they're just removing the game. That's literally all there is to it, and it's kind of unfortunate. I think that this is always unfortunate, making it so that certain, countries or whatever can't play certain games. I think that's sort of like censorship, sort of in some sense, but it's just lazy, quite frankly. I think that the industry needs to move away from loot boxes. It needs to move away from pay-to-win randomized elements. It needs to remove itself from the gambling industry altogether. I think it's awful. It's against game design, and there's certain ways you can do it right, but nobody's doing it right. And so it's just so bad. And certain games, such as Team Sonic Racing, which is released, it has randomized elements, it has randomized progression, it has thing, but it actually isn't monetized. You don't pay money for it. And so basically, they're able to make it so that it favors characters that you race with more, it favors things that you've been doing more often, and so it can actually progress you more quickly. Even though it's randomized, you don't know what you're going to get, it also encourages you to do what you're doing and actually feels rewarding, strangely enough. None of these games are doing that. They're all just here to make money, and they're like, we don't make that much money on Belgium anyways, so they're just removing it from the storefront. So there you go. It's just lazy and honestly awful. Now, if you are in Belgium and you have these games installed, you can still use your orbs, leaf tickets, whatever, until the service ends. So there's a positive note, I guess. quite frankly, it's dumb. And also, I don't think you can transfer your account to another region either. I don't know if it does region locking, but you might be able to. So keep an eye on Reddit, forums, etc. to see if you can actually do that. So if you are interested in keeping your progress in another region, look up and see if you can do that, because you might be able to. Maybe they're just blocking the IPs and just blocking the download through the Belgium, app store or whatever. So I don't know. I don't know how that works. I've never been blocked from games except for outside of Japan, and then you just use a VPN for when you sign up, and then after that it's fine. Anyways, moving on to the other articles, we're going to start taper off here. Many at Xbox and PlayStation were blindsided by Microsoft and Sony's secretive cloud deal, to where they were basically making a strategic platform. This is kind of a clarification from last week when I was talking about it. Basically, apparently, a lot of people within the companies were not actually notified that they were teaming up to sort of work on this stuff, and they didn't have the strategic partnership to work with AI, computer technology, and cloud services. And so they were like, oh, hey, that's kind of weird. And it actually shows just, how out of nowhere it kind of was for a lot of people. And it was really surprising because, again, like I said last week, they are big competitors when it comes down to software and gaming, et cetera, and tech companies often have these rivalries. So two of the biggest rivalries just being like, nah, we're going to shake hands, guys, and we're going to make something great. Like, that's just awesome, quite frankly. Again, like I said last week, they probably aren't going to make like a universal streaming service for everything, but they probably will end up sharing a lot of features between whatever they end up releasing individually, which is always a good thing. Talking about Sony, Sony opens PlayStation Productions to develop multiple game franchises into TV and movies. I've never been a fan of TV movie adaptations of video games. They've always been pretty scummy, but basically they were saying here, would fans beat a 40 to 50 hour game and have to wait 3 to 4 years for a sequel, we want to give them places they can go and still have more of that experience and see the characters they love evolve in different ways. So basically what they want to do is they want to add additional story, they want to add additional content to games that take forever to develop. And one of the examples here was obviously Nathan Drake from Uncharted, or, there are other types of story-driven games that are like, hey, we can make like TV adaptations or movies out of this sort of stuff. Now, for me, the multimedia type stuff is quite frankly, but they do compare it to things like Marvel, which has been taking off right now, and I think it might be a trend chaser, and that kind of worries me. And honestly, I ain't all excited. I don't really care. But some people might actually think it's quite exciting. They might think it's really, really cool to see this sort of stuff. And I think the multimedia mixing is a good idea. It's just never really executed well. And I know a lot of Marvel fans have been really upset with the Marvel movies as well, because it's just like kind of changed and shift the comics market, because while they're supposedly really good movies, it's also shifted the comics market to shift towards the movie market, which has kind of destroyed the stuff they loved originally in some sense, to where they're not getting new stuff that they liked before. They're just getting new stuff that they like instead of both. So again, it can end up soloing things. And the one thing that I'm really worried about, especially given Sony's history, is that they'll end up skimping out things on their game to end up making into a movie, a la Square Enix. Because Square Enix did this with Final Fantasy 15. So yeah, it's like, oh, we're not going to have like a prologue that actually gives you context for all this stuff. We're just going to make it a small little interactive movie thing. Which is like, what? So yeah, I think separating video games and movies is a good thing, but at the same time, I'm not against them being together either. I just think that it probably isn't for me personally, because I just don't watch TV or movies, quite frankly. Now some smaller topics that I won't talk too much about. Valve is making standalone version of Dota Auto Chess. The original mod developer, what was his name, Roto, is making the Chinese version. I assume this is for different sort of regional differences about labor laws and things like that between China and the US, especially right now. We currently have a thing, I'll talk about it in a minute, when it comes down to China, which is really, really unfortunate and actually kind of exemplates this problem. I'll reference it in a second. But essentially, Auto Chess was a very popular sort of custom game within Dota's custom game engine thing. I forgot what it's called. But basically, you have these creative tools where you can just make your own little small games and things, or game modes. And basically, Auto Chess is like chess, but like with cards and things, and it's kind of like an artifact, but better, is what people were calling it. And so basically, they're making a standalone version of that. And considering the fact that Dota existed from a custom game of Warcraft, people are saying this could be the next big thing. Like the next big mod into big game franchise sort of thing, which Valve has done really, really well with. So they could end up executing this really well, especially since Artifact failed. So it's actually really cool. Personally, I've never played it. I've wanted to play it for quite a while, but just never got around to it. But it sounds pretty cool. So there you go. If you've been looking forward to that, Valve will be making a standalone version. And if you're in China, Dota will have a different version that isn't Dota related, but it is technically auto chess. It's just its own thing with its own characters and stuff like that. But it will be the same game, supposedly. Supposedly they're going to work together as much as possible to make them the same. EA shows off Frostbite Engine's next-gen hair physics. I don't have a way to show it on screen at the moment because I don't want to get copyright striked by, EA from their Frostbite Engine thing, but I will link to the article in the description. Go check it out. Basically, it looks incredible. I assume there is going to be a ton of pre-rendering when it comes into this and a lot of factors that end up going into performance and things of this sort of thing. But essentially, it looks like hair on a very, very creepy mannequin. It's pretty freaking epic. And stuff like this, for as many complaints we get about the Frostbite engine, the engine's beautiful at the end of the day. And it has the capabilities to make things looking ultra realistic and really, really pretty with very little performance costs. We've seen this with the Battlefield games specifically, to where basically they've been the masters of this. Now, that engine is specifically designed for first-person shooters, and we had people talking about this engine in a negative light when it came down to both Andromeda and Anthem's release, because BioWare just was not able to use the engine for an RPG properly. So the amount of games that we'll see using this type of thing is probably going to be limited, especially since EA just has a habit of ruining all their games. So that's a little bit unfortunate. But Frostbite might not be EA's forever, so you never know. It just looks pretty, and it's really cool from a technical standpoint, and I really hope that people are kind of pushing forward in the graphical sense more and more, because it means that the lower standard gets raised. And the most important thing about here is that they're able to run it real time. If we can get hair physics like this in real time in an actual game, that means that other things are getting big optimizations that make just the game in general easier to run, which is always a good thing and a good push forward. It also pushes other people to be a little bit competitive and be like, oh, you think you have realistic hair? Well, check out ours. And then they end up making their own. Anyways, it looks really good. I'm sure there's a lot of work that goes into it and a lot of pre-rendering, and it probably won't be used in runtime video games very often, but it's cool looking nonetheless. Walkout organizers are disappointed by Riot's refusal to change forced arbitration policy. Basically, I talked about the walkout a week or two ago, and basically they had the big walkout to where everyone's like, hey, we're going to step up and walk out of the office and basically protest against the sexism and discrimination that's been happening in the main Riot offices. And Riot basically didn't respond to it at all. They're like, nah, we're not going to remove the forced arbitration. We're just going to keep it. And yeah, that's the end of that. They just didn't care, quite frankly. And that's probably telling. They just didn't care whatsoever. Now, this article is a little bit longer than this. It does talk about all the people that ended up going into it and the complications for it and et cetera, so you can end up reading through that in the description as well. I don't personally find it worth talking about because I already talked about it in a previous video, but there you go. Basically, Riot just doesn't care, and that's kind of what everyone assumed anyways, quite frankly. Players are mistaking WoW Classic features for bugs. So WoW Classic ended up releasing into its beta form or whatever. I don't know if it's officially launched yet. I think it's only in its beta at the moment. But basically, they had big stress tests and things like that. But people ended up playing it, and they were like, oh, well, this thing isn't working how I remember it. And then basically, they were actually features of the original, as in, oh yeah, no, that's how it's supposed to be. Like, a lot of things that were inconvenient. Like, oh, I can't access this menu when in this menu or something like that. And it was like, oh no, that's how the original WoW worked. And a lot of people were realizing that their memories of the original classic WoW may not be 100% representative of classic WoW. So yeah, they are making a lot of adjustments to the original classic, and they have mentioned things that they're going to be improving here and there. So it's not like it's, 100% the vanilla experience, but a lot of people have been like, oh yeah, this thing isn't working like it is in current WoW. And they're like, yeah, that's because that's not how it works in the classic WoW. That's not how it worked all the way back when WoW originally released. Classic WoW is a completely different game, and this has just kind of exemplified that. And there's a lot of quality of life features that people are kind of missing and stuff, and they're like, hey, this isn't here, and it's like, oh yeah, it's because it was never there. We added this in whatever X expansion that happened 7 years later. So yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. People aren't exactly remembering it, and a lot of the rose-tinted glasses are kind of shattering because of it. But then again, a lot of people are actually enjoying WoW Classic quite a bit because it is a completely different experience, and it's kind of a callback down to the original classic WoW, which is pretty cool for a lot of people. Sorry, I went on way longer than I should have on that topic. Lords of the Fallen's 2 new developer cut loose after less than a year. So basically, Defiant Studios was basically called out by, wait, hold on. Let me see. Fine, seems less than pleased. I'm trying to find the specific names. What is the name of the original developer? Categorized made by. Okay, so CI Games, is that what it is? Is it CI or CL? I think it's CI Games. Okay, anyways, the original developers, or the publisher slash main developer of Lords of the Fallen 2, basically said that Defiant Studios wasn't making proper, game. Basically, they were like, hey, they're not making it to our quality standards, and so we're going to drop them in less than a year. And basically, Defiant Studios isn't happy about that. They're like, hey, we don't like how they're characterizing us, and we think that that's kind of lame. And they're saying that their accusations are incorrect. So take that as you will, quite frankly. Dauntless launches as a cross-platform on PC and console. So basically, Dauntless came out, and it's immediately cross-platform, and you can save your progress across both platforms, which is super, super nice. And I think that's really, really cool. Not very many games launch like that, so that's the only reason why I'm announcing it. And then this is the topic, and this is our final one for the day. Google reportedly ends business with Huawei, or Huawei? I don't know how to say it. We'll cut it off from the Play Store. So basically what's ended up happening right now in the US is the fact that the moron in charge of our government at the moment, at the top of the legislation in our president's position, has basically made an executive order to cut the support for basically US companies can no longer help support or manufacture microchips or services for certain countries, including China. Huawei is from China. Now, Huawei is already kind of speculated to be spying on things, or they install backdoors for the Chinese government, or they end up having all this other types of questionable stuff, etc., etc. And so this has kind of been a long thing running. A lot of people have already ended up kind of cutting off Huawei. But this is relevant to video games because a lot of people like the Huawei stuff for gaming specifically. Like, they'll buy a tablet for gaming because they make some pretty good stuff that's pretty cheap. And so they'll end up buying them for, like, let's say tablet games, for example. If you want like an Android gaming tablet, they have some better ones or whatever, and they're cheaper and more affordable. And so that's why it's kind of relevant. But the bigger aspect here, however, is the fact that Google is actually cutting off tracks, and it's actually showing that this sort of executive ban is actually going into play because Google is a US company. A lot of other companies are also starting to ban other companies like this. So basically, Amazon is another one that's actually trying to sort of cut off its leashes towards other Chinese companies. And so this is kind of just an unfortunate reality. I won't talk about it too much. There's a big article about it in the description from Ars Technica that I'll link. But this is a long-running issue that's been going on for the last few weeks or whatever since the executive order, and so it's just now kind of going into place because the time limit's running out, and Google has just ended business. Now, for existing Huawei, I'm saying that wrong, I know I am, Huawei item owners, basically people that already own their phones and tablets, they say that they're going to actually support it, and they've actually been given a sort of timeline by the US government and by Google and Amazon, etc., to actually support their devices for a limited time. But then after that time's up, they have to basically have those services removed, and they have to replace it with their own. And so basically they're probably going to be replacing it with their own Chinese app stores, etc., which means that if you are somebody who owns one of those phones or one of those tablets, or you were looking forward to one of their future ones, you're going to need to get all your apps externally, which is going to be a pain in the rear, quite frankly, unless you want to use their storefronts, which I don't know how they work. I don't know how good they are, but there you go. But I thought that was interesting because it kind of is just limiting stuff off. Now, I'm not going to praise Huawei or recommend them or anything because technically they've been spying for years, quite frankly, and everyone's known about it. So they're not exactly a great company to buy from, but some people liked them just for gaming specifically, and so it ain't that big of a deal for some people. But there you go. And yeah, it's just interesting because now we have an executive order from a xenophobic government that is now just restricting access to products. And so basically they won't be selling in the US anymore, quite frankly. And yeah, some people won't care. I care because it's the tech industry and we should have as much variety as possible, and that actually, as much diversity as we can. And this is kind of pushing against that very forcibly, which is kind of unfortunate. But the dropping of Huawei, who is spying and stuff, probably a good thing. Anyways, now we'll talk about some personal news. This week I ended up getting Team Sonic Racing, so I have a new PC overview of it. I'm almost done with my review as well. It's not a very long game, but I'll have that out in the next week or so or whatever. So if you're looking forward to that one, make sure to check that out. Link in the description. I'm sure I'll end up having that game in the background the entire time as well. I don't pre-record my B-roll for this type of stuff. I just kind of decide after I end up recording it and getting the audio set up and everything. So I don't know what will be in the background, but most likely it will be Team Sonic Racing. So if you've liked what you've seen in the background, go ahead and pick it up. It has mixed reviews and stuff like that, but my review for it so far is pretty praiseworthy. It's a little bit short and a little bit content threadbare in certain places, but it's overall a great game. New blog post on my website. I talk about Yumi and League of Legends' new champion. I have a new blog post that comes out every Monday at the moment, and every time I'm late, I'm just going to shift it over a few days because, quite frankly, I can't get a blog post out every single week. That's a little bit unreasonable to expect from me at this moment because, quite frankly, I'm working on a lot of projects, but I've been working on my rhythm game a little bit, and quite frankly, I took a lot of time just playing video games. Had a little bit of a stressful week last week, and so basically I just kind of chilled out this week with Team Sonic Racing and some League of Legends and stuff. So that's how my week went. Not really anything interesting to go off of, but yeah. website got some new updates, so go ahead and check that out. And my mods will be getting a new update in either this week or next week, so if you're looking forward to that type of stuff, make sure to check out my website. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this one. You don't necessarily need to comment, but you can comment below with your thoughts on the news articles or any sort of clarifications you want, or any clarifications you want to add to anything. Or, if you want to see news articles in the future, you can check out our gaming Discord called The Broken Chat Box, link in the description. We have a news and such section, so all the links to this type of stuff is not only in the description of the video, but is also on the Discord channel there as well. And there's also other stuff in there that I didn't cover in this video that were just kind of minor stuff that I didn't want to throw in for time's sake. And of course, you can end up checking out my website if you like my styles of content. michaelpstanich.com, link in the description as well. And there I end up doing weekly blog posts now, or semi-weekly or whatever. I don't know how I'm going to do it. Quite frankly, right now I'm doing it weekly, but I don't have a great history with doing that, so we'll see how long it lasts. But you can also end up checking out my mods, my other video stuff, and of course, you can check out my game projects, which I'm super, super excited for. The rhythm game, which is currently called Project Akita, which I'm kind of working on some different names for it, so that might not be the name when it ends up releasing, is getting closer and closer to release, so I'm really, really excited for that. So we'll see how that goes. It's just going to be an early alpha prototype thing, so it won't be too special, but yeah, really excited. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. I need a funny quip to do at the end of the video, but I don't have one. So that.